Hi, Bill. How are you doing today?
Hey, Robin, I'm doing well. How are you today?
Back on the road, traveling around the world, seeing beautiful people, doing beautiful things, and learning lots about security. So, this week has been very exciting, and I'm just going to get
It really
straight
has,
into it.
yeah.
Let's talk about Ferrari. Now, over the past
Hmm.
24 hours, we've had lovely news that Ferrari, unfortunately, has become the victim of a ransomware attack. Now, the Ferrari folks have sent out a press announcement indicating that customer information, details, sensitive data has been the victim of a ransomware attack. That data has been leaked, and currently they're in the extortion phase for actually having payment to be processed. Now, we currently don't know the full impact of what data has been leaked out there, but darknet sources indicate that it is very personally and privately sensitive. Now, the folks who claimed to have done this is a company called RansomEXX. And at indicative size estimates, they claim to have only taken 7 gigabytes of data. Now, how much personal information could I fit into 7 gigabytes?
That's an awful lot.
There's an awful lot. There's an awful lot. You know, today you might be downloading games or installing applications and you see 7 gigabytes of a hard drive. People think that's absolutely tiny. But when you consider every single text character, every space, every punctuation mark is 1 byte, 7 gig is a huge amount. Heck, we got to the
That's right.
moon with 8 megabytes of storage, if I remember correctly. It was a little before my time. So Ferrari are currently under the kibosh. So Ferrari isn't the only auto manufacturer to have gone through similar attacks. We've seen things in the past from Volvo, we've seen things from BMW and other car manufacturers. But the interesting thing about this Ferrari breach was that back in October, they claimed that their Formula One partnership was sponsored through Bitdefender, so they had security tools in place. Bill, how can somebody get attacked with ransomware if they already have a security solution?
Robin, superb question. And this is
Hmm.
a little bit of a mental trap that a lot of organizations fall into. And that is believing that simply because you have a tool or a couple tools, you are automatically protected. But when we look at it from a security posture standpoint, and we say this about every 2 or 3 episodes, you really have to look at it from a defense in depth standpoint. Threat actors, they know how to get around tools. And unless you have all of these working in concert, sharing data with each other, it makes it a whole lot easier for threat actors to get in. We talk about the SANS Institute and David Bianco, who kind of coined this concept of the pyramid of pain. And if you're going to take it from individual tools that rely on things like hash values or IP addresses or whatever the case may be, and really ramp up the difficulty for a threat actor to be able to act on objectives, you've got to get to TTPs. You've got to get to tactics, techniques, and procedures. That means you need the full stack with shared information. You got to look at it as behavior. So, yeah, Robin, this is an unfortunate one, and as you said, simply waving the flag and saying we have tools, that really isn't enough.
It's not. Sometimes waving the flag and saying I have tools actually opens the floodgates for attackers more than defend against them. Now, if I know
It
you're
does.
using one vendor, well, maybe I can exploit a 0 day. The more information somebody knows about your network, the vendors you use, the physical location you are, where you are in the world, those are all intelligence points. Those are data points which can be used to build your attack surface, which is why I always tell people, just from a personal standpoint, don't tell people where you are in the world. Don't share pictures of you in a room with lots of people because you're delivering training. Don't tell people you're flying places because those are data points that can be used to attack you and to hurt you. Now, with this Ferrari ransomware attack that they're currently going through, and if this is still an active threat, we need to understand, how did somebody first breach that perimeter? What are the tools, the techniques, and the P practices, protocols? Remind the listeners.
Procedures.
Tool. Procedures. Well done. Well, looks nice to know you're actually paying attention. So the tools, the techniques, and procedures used by threat actors to actually get into the perimeter. Because once somebody is in the perimeter, once somebody has traversed that moat and got into your network, that's when they can start to exfiltrate data. That's when they can start encrypting data. And if you remember back to last week's episode where we went through the 6 E's of ransomware, each one of those attack steps can have a mitigation point. Now, if Ferrari had all of the tools in place to secure their perimeter, to identify each step of the attack kill chain, and to have a unified context to link all of these data points together, I will put some theoretical cash on the line to say that they would not be in this situation that they are today. But once again, we don't want to victim blame. We just want to use this data that we have to prevent other people from falling into that ransomware trap. Because every week,
That's right,
we're seeing more and more organizations being extorted, being bribed, and being kind of held to ransom. Because it's a big market out there. And especially with the ability to start doing things like generative AI, deep fakes, and the ease of phishing, the quantity of ransomware is likely to go up. No longer can you trust a phone call from your CEO, because now that can be a deepfake voice. No longer can you trust a video sent to you from somebody else, because heck, I could be AI generated right now, playing my video down an audio interface or a visual interface to simulate what is happening. You can't trust anything you see on the internet. So therefore, ransomware will become more prevalent. Fingers crossed things get better. Do you see things getting better, or do you see things getting worse?
This is a cyclic thing, Robin, and we know this just from the years of experience that we have. One of the big discussion points right now is ChatGPT, of course. And so, of course, we can't get an episode through without saying that enables the open source intelligence search engines to know that we're talking about it, and therefore we can be flagged. But there is a lot of fear around ChatGPT right now in the ways that it will enable threat actors to attack. By the same token, that same technology can and is used by those of us who are trying to protect our digital lifestyle. So back to your question, Robin, you're always going to see this in a cyclic fashion. You have to be prepared. You have to adopt an offensive security mindset so that you're able to appropriately scale up your security posture and be ready for whatever's next.
Hey, that's the Cato tagline, I believe. Ready for whatever's next. And yeah, we can protect. So yeah, you said the title of the movie. Well done. Way. But so fingers crossed, Ferrari get out of this without too much of an impact. Sure, they're being extorted.
Let's hope so.
Sure, there's going to be legal and financial implications to not adequately handling the customer or sensitive data. But all we can hope is that they mitigate the overall impact, learn from this lesson, and take it away and take actionable steps to prevent this from happening in the future. Secure your perimeter,
it's now
have
part of
unified
business.
context. Yes, we want to make life easier. But anyway, what do you have on your agenda? What have you been looking at in the security feeds this week?
Well, Robin, we've talked a lot about ransomware, and sometimes I think we can get tunnel vision when we begin to focus on particular areas. It's necessary, right? We want to dig in a little bit, and certainly our last episode, talking through the 6 E's of ransomware, very, very important that is understood by security practitioners so that you can begin to build toward, again, behaviors rather than simple signatures. I figure we'll kind of switch back a little bit to something that we've talked about multiple times, and that is Trojans. So a lot of times we will see news surging about certain campaigns involving Trojans. The one that I want to focus on this week is Mispadu. Now, Mispadu is a banking Trojan. And the reason it's a banking Trojan is because it is targeting individuals to exfiltrate their credentials. It'll even take screenshots and record keystrokes so that the threat actor is able to access banking sites, and that's how they're making their money. So not so much an extortion as it is a kind of a straight out theft that Mispadu is looking to do. Now, this involves multiple steps, just like it does in ransomware. In the case of Mispadu, not only does it exfiltrate those credentials and record those things that I already mentioned, but part of the campaign is to infiltrate legitimate websites and compromise those, turning those into command and control devices. Now, this adds a whole different flavor on this, Robin. This isn't a domain generation algorithm or some site that was literally stood up a few days ago and we can rely on that exclusively. This is compromising websites that are already set up, for example, WordPress websites, as the command and control servers, so that Mispadu, when it exfiltrates that data, it goes to sites that are seemingly harmless websites. And this is happening tremendously in Latin America right now. Mostly Latin American users are being targeted. And the estimates, according to the news, is that around 90,000 credentials have been stolen so far. So that's really what's in the news.
So how are the credentials actually stolen?
So the initial vector to this threat in order to get this Trojan installed is, again, through a phishing campaign. So here we go again, right? The email shows up and claims that there's a document from the bank that the user should open. It looks legitimate. Threat actors are getting better and better at generating these phishing emails. It helps with tools like Metasploit and so forth. But that malicious document will actually redirect to a URL. And when they hit that URL, here comes the drive-by download, right? The Trojan is downloaded. And for Mispadu, it's downloading AutoIT and Mispadu rogue certs. So these certificates make it look like these are legitimate applications. This Trojan, it makes it look legitimate to endpoint malware engines. So here we are with evasion again. We talked about this last time with ransomware. How do we evade? Well, in this instance, we're not killing the endpoint tool. We're evading it by looking like we're legitimate. Now, once it lands, it actually installs using WMI command line. So obviously we're talking Windows. A listener will then connect to the command and control server, which again could be, a WordPress website, for example. And then an info stealer will exfiltrate the credentials, and it's looking in two particular places, Robin. It's looking in Chrome because it's looking for your cached credentials, and it's also looking in Outlook to try to find those credentials. So if I can't compromise directly, I'll try to compromise through email. This is how it's actually working. So once the Trojan lands and it has a certificate that looks legit and it's installed, then it begins its work of doing screenshots, doing keylog captures, and trying to pull those credentials out of those devices.
Wow. I know a lot of people are now using Google Chrome Certificate Manager. They're using it to store their credit card information, all of their passwords. And there's a huge Google marketing campaign trying to push people to use those features. But that can be stored in plain text. So if somebody's screen scraping, if somebody's stealing your cache credentials, then you have just swung the doors wide open to attack. So
true.
How can this be prevented? Drive-by attacks can happen on any website. It's quite easy to write a simple few lines of JavaScript to actually enforce an auto-download when you go to a site. How can it be prevented?
Sometimes, Robin, I think these conversations that we have are scaring people to death. And, our intent is not to necessarily frighten, but to inform. And certainly, just as you characterize it, all it takes is being able to compromise a web server or stand up a web server, and with a few lines of code, somebody so much as hits that website and they begin the download, sometimes even at unawares. So one of the ways that we can protect there is DNS protection as part of an intrusion prevention system. This is where we're going to look at low reputation domains or malicious domains, right? Ones that have even been identified as malicious. And DNS protection will stop those URLs from being resolved to IP addresses. I know we're getting a little down in the network weeds here, but it'll stop it from being resolved, which means the browser can't actually get there. It doesn't know where to go, and thus we prevent the possibility that a malicious payload is going to be received by a drive-by download. Now, in the event that you happen to still hit that site for whatever reason, on-path next generation anti-malware is your friend. I mentioned this in a prior episode, but we're so often asked, if I have an on-path next generation anti-malware, do I really need endpoint protection? Or they'll even ask the reverse of the question, I have endpoint protection, do I need on-path malware protection? The answer is that you need both if you're going to do defense in depth. And that way, even if the malware manages to land on the endpoint and it does try to kill any anti-malware that's running on the endpoint, it may be successful, but it cannot kill the on-path next-gen anti-malware. So you're going to catch it that way. But Robin, I think there's one other piece that we need to discuss, and we've never brought it up before during our conversations. And that's that when you have a site, whether it's a rogue site or a site with a reputation that you're unsure of, or it's a category of site that maybe you don't want your users accessing openly, we have an opportunity to prevent those drive-by downloads, even if they manage to hit those websites. And I think we can do that using a concept of remote browser isolation. Now, this is a concept that essentially isolates the user's browser view from what is actually being served from the web server. There's a number of ways you can do it. Mm-hmm. But Robin, I think you've got some very exciting news to share. I'd like to turn it over to you and let's hear a little bit more about remote browser isolation.
Of course. So, Cato, we're constantly updating our security features, our security policies, and we're expanding our unified single context to cover every facet of network security. Now, remote browser isolation will be one of our next large enhancements, which will be available to all of our customers in a few weeks from now. No specific dates, but it'll be very, very close. And we'll do additional videos, YouTube-style content, all about remote browser isolation. But at its very heart, remote browser isolation is about not serving web content directly to your browsers or directly to your users. Instead, you use a third-party man in the middle to only serve pixels to your end users. From a nerdy perspective, it means that you're not fully loading scripts and Java and all of the other naughtiness of the internet directly in your browser. Instead, another machine is doing that for you, and then only sending the rendered canvas element to your endpoint machine, which means things like cache steals, that gets blocked. Things like drive-by downloads, that gets blocked. Things like cross-site scripting injections, that gets blocked. This means your users can visit websites which might not be 100% safe and secure without Cato. But with Cato, it will be protected, it'll be proxied, and all of your data remains secure. This is an additional layer of network security on top of our reputation engines, on top of our DNS protection, on top of our intrusion prevention, anti-malware, and more. So if you had all of the layers of security enabled through Cato, using our single context, using our unified single pass architecture, this wouldn't be a problem for your users at all.
That's right.
In the event that the Trojan, the malware, ended up on one of your endpoint machines, somehow, I don't know how, maybe somebody plugged in a USB stick and dragged something dangerous on, we would still protect. North, south, east, west, traffic movement, we would block. That would be through IPS or next-gen anti-malware. But if somebody went to a site that was spoofing something legitimate, one of your internal websites maybe, but they used domain squatting or had an uncategorized URL, remote browser isolation would kick in and help save the day. So this is defense in depth. You need to look at every single step of the attack kill chain, every single point in which data moves from one place to another, even if it's in a local directory, and then observe ways of protecting against each stage of that life cycle. Cato can protect against every one of them, And when remote browser isolation is available, that will just add yet another layer of security to the overall preventative stack. I'm excited. We're sure to be
Very
talking
exciting.
lots and lots about remote browser isolation in the future, but it's coming soon. It's coming very soon, and I'm excited. I hope you're excited too, Bill.
Me too. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. But folks, you stay
Okay.
safe out there, and until next time, be well.
Take care, everyone.